I really want this message to just get out to people about not fearing death, because we have such a beautiful world here, but where we go back to is home, and it is even more glorious and radiant, and we are eternal.
Hey everybody, welcome to Perpetual Motion, a podcast focused on self-care, financial independence, communication, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson. Each episode, I interview thought leaders from all over the globe who share tips and tools to boost your personal growth. My guest today is extraordinary. Nicole Angelique Kerr is an award-winning health expert, author, and Air Force veteran. At the age of 19, she was in an awful car crash and had a near-death experience which transformed her life. She has authored a book on how that experience taught her to live fully and not fear death. Imagine that, not fearing death. And she joins me today to share how you can release the fear surrounding death that most of us have. This is one you don't want to miss, folks. Nicole's story is nothing short of amazing. So stay with us. And if you're new to the show or a returning visitor, let's make this official and hit that subscribe button. Welcome, Nicole.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mo. I am excited and very grateful to be on your show today, and so glad to meet you.
Yes. Likewise. I love this topic. From the time you first reached out to me, I was like, oh my goodness, I've seen documentaries. I've seen it on the news, but I've never had an opportunity to speak with someone who's had an experience like this. But let's start at the beginning. You were an active 19-year-old girl. I believe you were in the military already, just starting your adult life, and this tragedy occurred. What was your life like prior to the terrible car accident?
I grew up in the South in Mississippi, so I was raised in the Bible Belt. We very religious. My dad was Southern Baptist, my mother Lutheran. So church was a huge foundation growing up. Also very conservative area. And my dad was former military. He went to the Air Force Academy and then was in the Marine Corps. So he wanted one of his four siblings to, of course, follow in his footsteps. And so I grew up going to parochial schools until the 8th grade, and then we went to public schools. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me to go to a school where I'd previously been with all Caucasian kids to schools now where I was in the minority that were predominantly African American. And so I got to experience what that was like, whereas a lot of my peers stayed in the same private preparatory parochial schools. And that was really enlightening for me to be able to integrate and to understand that, to get out of that bubble that we typically stay in with our communities. You know, I did ballet, piano. I was a model. I was 17 magazine. If you remember those days, I was their national representative.
Did. I had a subscription.
Yeah. So I was the Mississippi representative for a year. So I did everything that you would think of that is non-military. And so when the time came to apply for colleges, my dad really pushed me to go. And that was right when they started admitting women to the service academies. And so I did, because I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I would do anything to get my dad's love, attention, affection, praise. And I thought this would be the cherry on top of the cake if I got accepted and could make it through the academy.
Sure.
Dr. Mo, I had no idea what I was in for. Okay. When I got accepted, I was like, oh my gosh, now I really got to go. I got to show up. And I was not an athlete. I was not a star student. I mean, I had average grades, but I just never had that desire to be in the military, to fly, to, train and just be in that type of environment and structure and hierarchy. And so when I got to boot camp, I immediately realized I was in the wrong place. And one thing I had to realize in my family, failure is not an option. You don't get to quit just because you want to quit something. You have to stick with it. And the process to get into the service academies is arduous, to say the least, and competitive. And so I couldn't handle the shame, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the feeling of less than, not good enough if I quit. So I endured and I made it through. And it was very abusive. Your first year at any service academy or just being in the military is going to be abusive. And not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, and for a lot of women, including myself, sexually. So I was miserable and I lived in fear of not being able to measure up or perform or get through the obstacle course or any of this. So here I am living in fear and just praying every day to make it through the next day. And so when the beginning of my sophomore year happened is when the car crash happened. And I was getting a ride back with a senior and from a squadron event. And needless to say, I didn't know he was drunk and we never made it back. And unfortunately, I was pronounced dead at the scene. So that ended my career in the Air Force. That ended my career as far as my life goes. And thank God for an angel. That was an EMT who I'm still in touch with today.
Well, let me jump in here before we go into the accident and your experience there, just to break it up a little bit. First, I want to commend you on, you have been on the forefront of diversity there. First of all, before we were talking about DE and I, to go to a school where you were in the minority. A lot of people are not exposed to minorities until they get to the military or to the corporate world. So you got that early on, and I'm sure it contributed to who you are today, that you're well able to get along with so many people, but additionally probably helped you in the military as well, despite all those challenges. And I'm sorry to hear about the abuse, but it's not a surprise. I had a friend who was an officer in the military, and when they were out training or whatever, she kept a knife in her boots, not for the enemy, but for her fellow soldiers. So, and we still see instances of things happening to women in the military, which is just appalling. And I hope they're being addressed. But I think you demonstrated there that you are a survivor and an overcomer between those two experiences. And I just really feel bad about what happened, but I feel great about what you've done with those tests, that you've turned them into such a great testimony. So you were about to share about having the car accident with, one of your fellow military people. And I want you to share about that. You shared a bit of it with me before, and it's just, unlike anything I've ever heard anybody talk about. But how was that experience when it happened? And I'm wondering, did you feel like you were dying? Did you see anything unusual? Just walk us through that day, that moment.
Yeah. So it was a Sunday night and, I was the last to leave this function. So I didn't have any other options but to go back with this one senior who had a car. And I didn't realize that he had a different agenda, that he wanted to stop and have a beer and have a cigarette and make out. And I was told by my father, who is very much about the rules, not to smoke, drink, or date cadets. In other words, don't have any fun when you go off to college. So I thought, okay, I'll go along with this guy. And needless to say, when we got on the road, I didn't realize that he was drunk. And when later, my memory came back. My memory stopped from the moment of impact until I woke up in the ICU at the hospital. I had absolute no memory of what happened except bright white lights. And that stayed with me for 19 years. And then I was at work one day and my memory started coming back. And I could start recalling how I was sitting in the car, But I knew from what was told to me by the doctors, by the EMT who came to my hospital later, what had happened at the scene. And what I can tell you is it was a 1965 Corvette convertible, and it was completely smashed. And even the sheriff said it's unsurvivable. And I now know that I had my foot on the dashboard and I went butt up through the windshield. And when I got up in the air, I knew I was going to die when I hit the ground. And I called out to God, God, please help me. And an angel came down. And when we die, I'm not sure if many people know this. It may be an alternative thinking for some, but we have an energy body. We're all energy. And upon death, that energy body cracks open from the top down and your soul leaves you. Okay. And my soul left me, and this angel came down and got me, took me up, and I could see the rest of what was happening to me, that I hit the ground and that I indeed did die. And so on the other side, I was like, you have to remember, you're not in human form. You're in soul form. So you don't see like your eyes see. You see 360 all around, and you see present, past, future. I mean, you see everything all at once, and you get things through vibration and telepathy. So on the other side, I heard two angels next to me talking, and it wasn't in English, but their message was to ask the angels for help. They were saying how they want to help us, meaning humans on earth, but we have to ask them for help unless it's an emergency, like my case was, where an angel will come in and take you. And that happens in a lot of trauma cases where people survive and they don't feel the pain because they never actually hit the ground and experience the impact and remember that. So it saves us from having to remember that incredible, excruciating pain of impact. So, it's a gift actually. And so on the other side, I heard that conversation and was told to remind people to ask their angels for help. There's a whole host, on the spiritual side, willing to help us, our guides, our angels, deceased loved ones. But we have to ask for their help because of something called free will. And we forget to do that, Dr. Mo. We get busy in our life and we forget to ask our angels to help us with whatever. It can be, I know people laugh at me when I talk about asking my angels for a parking space, but every time I ask, they produce. So it's a relationship with your angels. It's a relationship with your soul. It's a relationship with your creator that you have to practice and get in the habit and not just call on when there is a health crisis or there's something that, is horrific. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, help me now, get in the habit of doing that daily. But the biggest message given to me by spirit when my memory returned, which was almost 20 years later after the actual event, was to not be afraid of death. And while that seemingly might seem like a quite simple task, it's taking me almost 4 decades to understand what that looks like for me. Wow. And now that I understand that purpose, I have shifted my focus towards the spirituality component of wellness that is really essential. When you look at the wellness wheel, there's physical, there's mental, there's emotional, there's spiritual, and very few of us in the wellness industry ever get into the spirituality quadrant because we don't want to, for lots of reasons, we don't want to offend people. We don't want to, whatever it is. But if you think about almost every book written about death, it's cloaked in a veil of doom and gloom. And death has this cloud of depression and negativity around it throughout our culture and society. And my own experience, along with hundreds of thousands of others that have had near-death experiences, is 100% different. Death is, absolute beauty, light, this loving kindness, this no strings attached love, and this peace that passes all understanding.
Great.
So, yeah.
Let me jump in there right quick before we talk about that. And we are going to talk about that more because that is a great message that I think people need to hear. But I'm Protestant, mom's a minister, got ministers and people all throughout the family, spent half of my childhood at church. But this idea of asking angels for help, I mean, we've always been taught to ask God and he sends angels. And it sounds like what you're saying is that we speak directly to the angels. I'm a little confused about that. Is that what you're saying, that we can just call on angels?
Yes. We don't need any kind of intermediary. We all have a guardian angel. Every single one of us. And we also, I now have developed a team of angels, just like you have the archangels. Each archangel has a specific function. The angels that are now with me each have a specific, quote, job to do. So, it is important to understand that, we have that freedom, that choice to connect with the angels. And I have been able to develop that relationship to where I know their names. My guardian angel is Seraphina. And I have, when I went to the other side, people often talk about seeing deceased loved ones. And that did not happen to me until last year. And that particular time, right after my book was published, I started smelling cigar smoke. And no one in my house smokes or smokes cigars. And I heard a voice saying, "This is your grandfather, Kerr." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're talking to me." And he
and
said,
smoking.
Yeah, and smoking. And he said, "I knew you would get the message because I'm the only one in the family that ever smoked cigars." And I was like, that's true. And so he died at age 58 in August. And so he's coming to me around the time that he died. Now I'm 58 years old and he's telling me in the book, I said the angel was more like Casper, the friendly ghost, because I had these characteristics that it was male, it was in his 30s, but I just didn't have a name for it. So he said, "I'm the angel that came down and helped you because I could see all the abuse that you were undergoing. I could see how much you just hated being there. You were in so much fear. You were terrified most of the time. And I wanted to help get you out. And so I was the one that came down and lifted you up and took you back to the other side." And, when I had that realization and that memory or that dialogue come through me, he said, "I have been with you since the accident and I will be with you until you make your final transition to help protect you," because I tried to leave a couple more times. I had 2 more near-death experiences in the hospital because when I was on the other side, it was so beautiful and so comforting. There was no negativity. There was no pain. There was no suffering. It was all good. Everything was good. There's no bad. And so I knew when I came back in my body, I could see it, the corpse laying in the ditch, that there was going to be a lot of pain and suffering. And I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to live with my being reduced back to a state of infancy at age 19 years old and be dependent on my parents when all my friends were off at college having a party. So,
Sure.
And I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I didn't know what my injuries were going to limit me with, or if I would ever be able to walk again. So a lot of fear. So that, was very comforting to me because now I can say one of my deceased loved ones did come to me and did lovingly help me out.
Yeah. Wow. You use the acronym BTDT. What does that stand for?
Oh, I love it. It's the best credential I have. Been there, done that. I actually put it on the cover of my book, and people are like, can you do that? I said, I self-published. Why not? But sometimes, we go through school, and I have a lot of other credentials. I'm a dietitian. I'm in public health. I've done neuro-emotional technique. I have a lot of different credentials, but that's my most important, because my experience on the other side and coming back and remembering it has given me, first of all, it's transformed me, and it has created empathy, sympathy, and compassion for people that have gone through such an experience, and people that are dealing with trauma in particular. Because if you don't heal the trauma that comes with a horrific situation, it will manifest in a very unhealthy, negative way in your body.
Yeah.
And my parents were told by the doctors after 4 months in the hospital, and just an up and down situation, multiple injuries. They were told Nicole's going to need psychiatric and psychological help. And my mother is very religious, and so is my father. And they looked at the doctor and said, Jesus is our psychologist. And while that may sound good, Jesus never came down and sat on the sofa and had a discussion and helped me deal with my PTSD, which manifested almost immediately in an eating disorder. And I had, back in the 80s, it was known as compulsive eating. Now it's known as binge eating disorder. And Dr. Mo, I know you know about eating disorders, but it is one of the most shame-based conditions someone can experience, because deep down you really hate yourself. And it's secretive. You're embarrassed to tell people that you're doing this. And my dad, just when I finally told him in my 30s, he's like, I don't understand how you can't just eat one piece of pizza. It's just willpower, and he never understood that. But that's what happened as a result of me not getting mental health help. And I had to live with that for 20 years until I got married at age 40 and understood. And I had been in therapy and trying to work on it. But it's really important to address the trauma wounds and the soul loss that can occur in these situations. And so that's, yeah.
And not just your parents, but the generations, before us, whether it was, World War II and beyond, mental health, as you know, we just really started talking about it, just started understanding that, the brain, the thoughts is another part of your body that can be injured as well. And you go to a professional for every other issue that you have. But yeah, I think a lot of us were told, just get over it, just buck up. The big one in my family was, you're too blessed to be stressed. And I would go through the Bible and show them all these examples of prophets and judges and kings and everybody who were clearly stressed. And I'd be like, and I don't even see that in here. You're too blessed to be stressed. So we need to stop saying that and to deal with the trauma. So many of us have gone through trauma that have changed our lives, changed our relationships, changed our personalities. And there's help out there. You can get help to move forward. And now we know we have angels who are happy to assist us as well. You just changed my whole perspective on that just in this conversation. So let's talk about your book. You've written a book about this journey, about this experience. It's called You Are Deathless, a near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. If you had, Nicole, to highlight one takeaway from the book, what would that be?
When you're in fear, you are not in clarity. And so your sympathetic system is running things. So if you're in fear of death, you're actually going to be scared. And that's going to cause resistance when it comes your time to pass. Okay. And when you're in fear, you're not going to truly live life. So I want people to understand that we don't die. Okay. Yes, this physical vessel that's carrying us around on earth is going to one day pass on and decay, but our soul lives forever. It is eternal. And that's why I call myself now, I'm in my vocation and I'm an internality advocate, meaning letting people know that their soul is everlasting. It goes on and on and on. And you don't need to fear death. It's like John Lennon said, you just go from one car into a next. And there's so many wonderful lessons that you can apply in your life today that myself and others that have had NDEs have brought back. And one is that love is all that matters and the source of all that exists. And that source is God. Okay. And God is love. And anything and anybody that puts fear into God in terms of scaring you, that is not of God. That is designed to control you and to keep you in a low vibration so that you don't become the being that you were created to be. And I actually, Dr. Mo, looked up the word fear, and in the 1600s, fear actually meant, in the King James Version, it meant awe and reverence.
Reverence, yeah.
Yes. And every NDE that I've talked to has felt that way about the experience they had. It was this awe and reverence of this white light and that they were going into, and this feeling of just, you can't even put it into words, but bliss beyond imagination. Okay. And that you were held and comforted, and nothing was going to be able to keep you from experiencing that light, love, grace, just a high that you can't even imagine. So now that word has gotten transformed and it's all about a negative experience. And I want people to understand that that is not of God. When I got to the other side, God was everywhere. There was nowhere God is not. And it's just like, oh my gosh, the Baptist church got that wrong. I am not going to hell. I'm not going to hell. Hell is on earth, actually. The people that are suffering and in pain and miserable because they've lost their connection to self or to creator or God or to other ones. They have been so traumatized in their life that they've turned, and that to me, these people in war-torn countries having to just, fight for a piece of bread, that is living, in hell, not knowing where your clean water is going to come from. So when people say, oh, you screwed up and you haven't followed these rules, those rules were man-made. Every church has a different set of rules, and the Lutheran church had a different set and the Baptist church had a different set. And I'm like, even God's got to be confused with all these different rules here. But in my experience, God is love, period. And there's nowhere God is not. And God is not judging you. And that is one thing that I really want people to understand on the other side is we are not judged. And if we could quit judging ourselves and love ourselves instead, think about how the vibration in the world would change.
Oh, yeah. Everything would change between nations, between relationships, within households. I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been such a fascinating conversation. And there's so much more that we could get into, but a lot of it is in your book. Yes. So please tell listeners how to connect with you online and learn more about your books and services.
Yeah, please go to my website, www.NicoleKerr.com, and I'll send you the first chapter for free. If you're in a book club and use my book, I want people to start talking about death. I want them to start preparing for death. I will pop in on a Zoom if you do it as a book club when you get together and talk to you and try to answer your questions. So I offer that for free. I'm on Amazon, I'm on Barnes & Noble and your independent bookstore, and you can connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. But go to my website, and that's the best way to connect with me. And I really want this message to just get out to people about not fearing death, because we have such a beautiful world here, but where we go back to is home, and it is even more glorious and radiant, and we are eternal.
We are eternal. Thank you, Angelique. Thank you for sharing this eye-opening experience. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And likewise, Dr. Mo.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time and energy. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share for more like this. And please visit my website at drmoanderson.com to book me as a speaker and learn more about my books and services. Until next time, be safe and be well. Thank you. And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and re-you. Thank you.